Welcome to another deep dive into the shadows of Port Charles. Today is a thrilling day to unpack some of the most explosive secrets we have ever stumbled upon. We need to talk about the absolute nightmare unfolding behind the stone walls of Windermere right now because the stakes have never been higher and the deception has never been deeper. Picture the cold and unforgiving dampness of that dungeon where Ross has just violently dragged Liesl and thrown her into a cell. She is completely disoriented and battered from the kidnapping, but her sharp mind is already calculating every single angle of her captivity. And there, sitting in the dim light of that very same cell, is Jocelyn. The young woman has been trapped there, terrified but quietly observing everything. But the real shock, the moment that makes your blood run cold, is when the heavy iron door groans open again and a ghost walks in. Cassius steps out of the shadows, and the psychological impact on Liesl is devastating. She is staring at the face of a man she thought she knew, a face tied to so much trauma and history, but the words coming out of his mouth rewrite everything. He is forced into a corner with Jocelyn watching his every move, and he finally confesses the horrifying truth about his identity. He drops the facade entirely and admits exactly who he is. No one expected that this confrontation would happen in such a claustrophobic and volatile environment, but here we are watching two brilliant and dangerous minds collide in the dark. It seems like this confession is just the tip of the iceberg because we have to ask ourselves why Cassius is really there. He stands before Liesl not as a captor, but as a man who claims he has been playing a massive and deadly game of chess. He reveals that he faked his death a long time ago, specifically to infiltrate this shadowy network. But what if his story is just another layer of manipulation? What if he is playing both sides to see who comes out on top? I have been analyzing his every move, and it is highly likely that Cassius is entirely desperate. He is looking at Liesl not with malice, but with a silent plea for help. He knows that Ross and Jens are ruthless, and he knows that their plan is moving into its final catastrophic phase. He needs Liesl to help him tear down the entire organization from the inside out. But Liesl is paralyzed by the sheer weight of his lies. How can she trust a man who wears a face of deception, who has lied to her and everyone else for so long? She initially refuses him, her heart hardened by the endless betrayal she has endured over the years. She turns her back on him, completely disgusted by the phantom standing in her cell. But then the narrative twists in a way that changes the entire landscape of this crisis. Liesl is a genius, and even as a hostage, she is observing the equipment, the guards, the conversations echoing down the stone hallways. She realizes something absolutely chilling about the project Ross and Jens are forcing her to complete. They do not care about the scientific prototype for its energy capabilities. They are not trying to revolutionize the world with a new power source. This means that the entire foundation of their operation is a lie. The truth could be much more complex and infinitely more sinister. Liesl discovers that they are building a machine designed for identity alteration. They are creating a technology that can literally map and transfer human consciousness or manipulate genetic markers to create a perfect duplicate, a synthetic puppet. And they intend to use this terrifying technology on a major figure in Port Charles. Just think about the implications of that for a second. What if Jen's plans to replace someone at the highest levels of power? Could be a police commissioner, could be a mob boss, could be a corporate titan. They want to swap a real person with a controlled asset and take over the city without firing a single shot. When Liesl pieces this together, the horror of the situation finally breaks through her stubborn refusal to help Cassius. But the real catalyst, the spark that ignites her fury, is a piece of intel she uncovers about Britt. She learns that Britt is not just missing, she is actively hiding in a secure, undisclosed location, and she is the ultimate trump card in this entire twisted scenario. Britt holds the final sequence, the missing link that makes the machine work, and she is staying out of reach to prevent Jens from achieving his goal. Liesl realizes that if she does not play this game perfectly, Britt will be hunted down and slaughtered. The emotional weight on Liesl is staggering. She is trapped in a dungeon, forced to build a doomsday device for a madman while her own flesh and blood is out there acting as the last line of defense against total systemic collapse. And while all these massive revelations are shaking the foundation of Windermere, we cannot forget about Jocelyn. If you ask me, Jocelyn is the absolute wild card in this scenario. She is not just sitting in the corner crying and waiting to be rescued. She is furious. She is sharp and she is fighting back in the only way she can. While Cassius and Liesl are caught up in their intense emotional standoff, Jocelyn uses the distraction to her advantage. She manages to slip away from their line of sight just long enough to steal a piece of crucial evidence. Maybe it is a data drive left carelessly on a table. Maybe it is a partial schematic of the identity machine, but she gets her hands on undeniable proof of the conspiracy. And she does not stop there. Using a smuggled device or tapping into a momentary weakness in the island security grid, she manages to send a frantic encrypted message out to the mainland. She bypasses the standard authorities because she knows the police are compromised or too slow. She reaches out directly to Portia and Jason. Imagine the absolute chaos that message causes when it lands. Portia is already dealing with unimaginable stress, her maternal instincts screaming that something is terribly wrong, and now she has confirmation that Jocelyn is trapped in a nightmare. And Jason, we all know what happens when Jason gets a target. The moment he sees that message, the moment he realizes what Ross and Jens are doing on that island, the temperature in Port Charles drops to freezing. Jason does not hesitate. He begins mobilizing a massive, heavily armed night raid. He is gathering his assets, checking his weapons, and preparing to storm the island under the cover of absolute darkness. Portia is right there with him, demanding to be part of the extraction, coordinating medical support, and pushing through her own terror to save the people she loves. The tension is unbearable because Jason knows that a frontal assault on Windermere is suicide unless it is executed with flawless precision. Back on the island, the clock is ticking down to 0. Ross is demanding results, and Jens is growing increasingly unstable. They drag Liesl out of the cell and force her into the laboratory where the prototype is humming with a sickening, unnatural energy. They demand she initiate the final sequence. Cassius is watching his hand hovering near his concealed weapon, waiting for the exact right second to strike. But the power in this room does not belong to the men with the guns. It belongs entirely to Liesl. She stands before the control panel, her hands resting on the keys that could destroy Port Charles or save it. She is faced with an impossible, agonizing choice. Does she stall for time and risk them executing Jocelyn right in front of her? Does she comply and hope that Jason arrives before the machine is fully operational, thereby risking Britt being exposed and hunted down? Or does she take the third option, the most dangerous and suicidal option of all? I am looking at the psychology of Liesl, and I am telling you she is not going to play the victim. She has suffered too much to let these arrogant men dictate her fate. What if she realizes that Jason is coming? What if she hears the distant muffled sound of the first perimeter alarms being tripped by the raid? She knows the cavalry is at the gates, but she also knows that Jens will kill everyone in the room the moment the door is breached. So Liesl makes a decision that will shake the island to its very bedrock. She decides to use the machine against them. She begins rapidly entering a sequence into the console, but it is not the sequence to stabilize the identity alteration matrix. It is a sequence designed to overload the core. She is turning their ultimate weapon into a devastating trap. She looks Jens dead in the eye with a cold, terrifying smile because she has just initiated a catastrophic countdown. As the machine begins to scream and the lights in the laboratory turn a violent flashing red, the metal doors blow inward and Jason steps through the smoke. But is he in time to stop the overload, or has Liesl just triggered an explosion that will bury all their secrets and all of them under the dark, freezing waters of the harbor?
Goodbye. Please like, subscribe, and comment on the GH Spoilers Daily channel.